The One Piece TCG World Championships are right around the corner with the best players around the world playing this weekend. However, I think the thing that's on everyone's mind is the potential changes to the ban list. Let's talk about it. Really quick, I just wanted to step in and say I just opened up a Ko-fi where you can donate or subscribe to help support the channel monetarily. And if you don't want to spend the money, that's okay. Like, comment, and subscribe, that also helps. So anyways, thanks all for the support. Let's get into the video. First, let's take a look at the current ban list where there's actually only 2 cards that are banned. We have Moby Dick and Kabaji. Both of these cards were banned on the release of OP03, but these cards were banned, in my opinion, for very different reasons. In OP02, Whitebeard was still a super dominant force. I was looking through some of the regional results from back then, and it's crazy that there were actually entire top 8s that were just Whitebeard. And that's not even Whitebeard at full power, because in OP03 there would be even more Whitebeard support. I don't think there has ever been a deck since that era of Whitebeard where a deck has been that dominant. And so for me, Moby Dick was banned purely basis on power level. Now, Kabaji, on the other hand, I think was banned as a precaution. For people unaware, this card was played in the new, at the time, OP03 Nami deck. If you don't know what OP03 Nami does, she has a alternate win condition in which that if you mill yourself, you win the game. I think this card was banned not because it was dominating tournaments and it was super over-representative of the meta, but I think it's just because Nami is one of those decks that shouldn't be at the top of the meta. Personally, I think Nami is a pretty cool deck. I know a lot of people online don't like playing against it, but I think that it deserves to be a playable deck in the meta. That said, if Nami's alternate win con is better than the core way that all the other decks in the game play, that is super wrong. That should not happen. However, since those cards were banned in OP03, there have been some other adjustments that have been made to the bans and restrictions list since then. On July 28th, Ninebeard, the 4-cost blocker Marco, and Radical Beam were restricted to 1 copy in any deck. This change set a new precedent for the game because it showed that Bandai was willing to 1, have a different meta for the West and the East, and 2, they were willing to restrict cards rather than outright banning them. These restrictions were probably a little deserved because by the time that we got to the end of OP03, Red would account for 70% or more of all decks that would top tournaments. I think for people who were playing during that era, it was clear that red was the best color and clearly an outlier compared to all the other colors. Finally, that brings us to the most recent changes that had happened for just a month period of time. On November 10th, they banned Searcher Nami, Curly Dadan, and restricted 5-cost Marco, and also banned Whitebeard Leader entirely. I can speak for a lot of people and say that this was a huge curveball. At this point, it felt like they were just trying to throw whatever they could, the kitchen sink, to make sure that Red wouldn't top any more tournaments. So let's talk about this decision and why it was so crazy. 1, it was the first time they outright banned a leader. 2, they were willing to ban a card that they were actively selling. Right at this time, ST10 came out and Searcher Nami was in that deck. So if you bought that starter deck, you weren't actually allowed to play that deck, which is crazy to me. And not only that, 3, they were willing to make these short-term bans. Now, at the time, people weren't sure that the ban wouldn't stay for that long, but they repealed the ban actually just 1 month later with the release of OP05. And that brings us to today, where now we just have the original 2 cards that were banned back in OP03 as our ban list. But now we are looking at potential more changes, and now I don't know what could happen. They've done so many different things with the list. To me, the only constant in all of these changes is that they were trying to impact the current meta and the overrepresentation of certain decks. So now let's take a look forward into OP06 and the Eastern meta, because clearly the devs are looking at the meta to see what they should be changing. To me, the clear winners here are the colors black and yellow. They're just the best colors in the game right now, and I don't think anyone can contest that. In my opinion, these colors are broken because they have access to resources that none of the other colors have. Black gets to use their trash pile or graveyard as a resource, and yellow gets to use their life pile as a resource. So compared to all the other decks, they don't really get that additional resource thing that black and yellow do. That said, outside of the actual colors themselves, the leader distribution for OP06 actually looks quite diverse in my opinion. So with that said, with OP06 looking the way it is, what is Bandai going to do with this meta? I've read a lot of sentiment over the last week or 2 of what people want banned and restricted and what changes that they want to see in the game, and I'll just start by talking about mine. Personally speaking, I actually don't think bans or restrictions are really needed in the game right now. Yes, it's true, there is a clear best color, there's a clear best deck in Sakazuki, or maybe Moria, I don't know, maybe it's arguable. But to me, arbitrarily banning the most powerful decks or the most powerful color will just make a power vacuum where the next best color and the next best deck will take its place. I feel like this can start a vicious cycle in which we continue to ban all the top cards, top decks, over and over and over, and we just get into this big old cycle where cards just rotate in and out really quickly because people are sick of the whatever the new flavor of the month is. To me, if you want changes in the meta, the places in which we can address those issues should be in the releases of new cards instead of bans. I would much prefer the decks that are underpowered or underrepresented to get more support in future sets rather than trying to pick apart the things that are already good. So looking at the wording of the announcement that they made on stream about the changes to the ban list, it also seems like they're maybe potentially looking at unbanning. They were very vague with the wording, so who knows? But my actual wish here is that if they're forced to make a change to the ban list, I actually want everything unbanned. So I know I already talked about how Moby Dick and Kabaji are both cards that should have been banned back in OP03, but I think a lot of things have changed since then. Each color has a stronger suite of removal options, and so no one is forced to only use combat as their way of removing things. And that's what I mean that the landscape has changed. Both Moby Dick and Kabaji are, yes, powerful cards, but they need other cards to be on the board to begin with. And so that's why I think that in the state of the game that we're in right now, where things are dying left and right no matter what, I think that it might be okay to bring back Moby Dick and bring back Kabaji. That's my hot take. So if I had a gun to my head and, you know, the person holding the gun was like, you have to ban something, otherwise you die. In order to live, I would probably touch something either directly to Sakazuki or black in general, and something in yellow as well, but things that are not essential to their game plan, but just hinder them a little bit. So for me, Sakazuki is clearly a problem leader. I think this is probably the most pushed leader they've ever created. Due to his unique color combination, Sakazuki gets to use blue cards in a way that is only beneficial to him, which is not a great thing for design space. So I would first take a look at a card that I think that is uniquely good to Sakazuki, and I think that card looks like Houndblades to me. I think Sakazuki is at his most powerful in the fact that he is removing things, but also putting really efficient pressure on the board with Houndblades, with Lucci, and etc. So I think those are the type of cards that I would take a look at if I was just trying to reduce Sakazuki's power. Now, if I was just to take a look at black as a whole, I would say that the problem space, obviously everyone looks at ACOS Moria, which is, yes, he is a very powerful card, but I think that some of the other cards that are around him support Moria in a way that makes him even more broken. For me, for black in general as a color, I think one of the cards that I look at in black that's a little problematic is Great Eruption. Black should be a deck that struggles to keep their hand size big, and they're forced to use their graveyard as a resource in order to catch up. Great Eruption kind of gets rid of that. Yes, there's a cost still in that you have to spend a Dawn to do so. However, the fact that you're able to cycle a card and keep a card to hand while still getting that reduction is a very powerful, it's like overlooked, I think, about how powerful that card is. But I think it supports black in a way that makes black a little bit too powerful. I would rather black be the color that uses your graveyard as a resource instead of your hand. But right now you get to kind of do both, and that I think is a problem. For yellow, I know people have been saying that they want to ban or restrict 10 cost Big Mom, and I honestly don't understand that whatsoever. So coming from the Magic the Gathering space and the competitive space there, like, I think it's really cool that you can spend all your resources on one card and like it being very powerful. Like in Magic, in the competitive formats, you almost never want to be playing these really high cost cards because they're inefficient. You want to rather be playing the powerful stuff that costs you like 2 mana, or like in Modern, for example, you don't cast anything for any mana. Like if it's 2 mana, that's considered expensive. Like for me, coming to One Piece, like the fact that people are complaining about a card that takes your entire turn to play out is like crazy to me. Of course, Big Mom is a frustrating card. It's a gatekeeper for sure, because basically it says you never get to have a late game beyond me, because 10 cost Big Mom is the answer to all late games. Big Mom is the ceiling in which there is a late game, and that's just how the card is. And I understand that for some people who play more fringe decks that rely on, you know, accruing slower advantages, that Big Mom presents a problem there. And I get that, but I think that there's always going to be a gatekeeper as like the top end of a deck. So if it's not Big Mom, it'll be someone else. And I don't know. I just don't see that being the core problem to yellow, especially because Katakuri is the only leader, relevant leader, I should say, that uses that card. Instead, if I was to look at yellow as a whole and talk about the cards that I think are causing a lot of frustration for kind of, you know, good reason, honestly, is the defensive triggers that save yellow's bacon when they don't really, you know, quote unquote deserve it. So cards that I see as being problematic are Beige and Amaru, because those cards are incredible triggers, but they're also good to have in your hand, which I think kind of defeats yellow's kind of color identity. So for me, yellow is all about putting powerful triggers into your deck, but the face cards that are on them are a little bit less efficient. So you want them to trigger, you don't want them in your hand. And I feel like that's been consistent for a lot of yellow's identities so far. However, that's being changed with some of these new cards where they're just good whenever you get them. You know, the new card in OP06, Okiku, is insanity. And I think the same thing for Amaru and for Beige. I think impacting these cards will make yellow feel a little bit more fair in that they have to maybe play a little more defensively and don't get bailed out nearly as frequently. But also, those cards feel like they go into the vast majority of all yellow decks because they're just good in all situations. And so I think those would be the cards that I would take without taking away yellow's identity of like triggering a body onto board and being punishing to hit them because now they have even more units to attack back at you. I think that's more fun and unique than just something like Beige not letting you attack with another character or trigger or whatever, you know, whatever. Anyways, that's it for my thoughts on bans and restrictions. Let me know what you guys think. Am I crazy? Or, you know, let me know if you agree or disagree. Like, I would love to know what the community thinks, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video once the bans and restrictions come out. So anyways, thanks y'all for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel, and see you guys next video. Peace out.